Imagine a writer's room with a future Oscar-winning screenwriter, two men who would define American political comedy, and a head writer who became one of the most famous comics of his generation. And oh yeah, there's also the guy whose name was on the show. The Dana Carvey Show was supposed to be a no-brainer for ABC, but what they got was a total 180 of what they expected. It was bizarre, provocative, and so controversial that, get this, 6 million people changed the channel before the first commercial break, and that was just the start. This is the story of the unreal collapse of the Dana Carvey Show and the legacy that's way bigger than people realize. Now before we start, give this video a like if you remember this glorious failure, and subscribe for more retro TV deep dives. Okay, let's go back to 1996. Dana Carvey had left Saturday Night Live 3 years earlier after 9 seasons and was, at that point, comedy royalty. He created some of the most iconic characters of his generation, like the Church Lady and, of course, Garth. And then there were his impressions of Ross Perot, George H.W. Bush, and many, many others. Wayne's World had made him a movie star in 1992. He followed that up with 2 more movies after SNL, Clean Slate, and Trapped in Paradise. He was bankable, and naturally, networks wanted a piece of the Dana Carvey cash machine. Enter ABC, a network that was crushing it at the time. They had Home Improvement, which was pulling in around 20 million viewers a week, but naturally, they wanted more. They came to Carvey with an offer that was hard to refuse, a primetime sketch show where he called the shots. They envisioned a crowd-pleasing variety show with all of his SNL characters entertaining America at 9:30 right after Home Improvement, a time slot that would open the floodgates of Carvey's ratings potential. Remember, this was before YouTube and Netflix. TV viewers up to that point had to wait until 11:30 on Saturday to watch Carvey do his thing. With an earlier time slot and Home Improvement as the lead-in, this looked like a smash hit waiting to happen, but ABC was about to get a lot more than they bargained for. Enter Robert Smigel. Smigel was Carvey's longtime collaborator from SNL, a writer and performer who had just turned down an offer to return to the show as a producer because he had a different vision. He wanted to build something that felt nothing like SNL. He wanted pure absurdism, sketches that didn't make sense and made no effort to explain themselves. It would be unlike anything aired on American network television. But of course, teamwork makes the dream work, and Smigel and Carvey indeed assembled a dream team. The writer's room was legendary. You had Louis C.K., a future Emmy-winning comedian and one of the most dominant stand-up voices of his generation, as the head writer. Then there was future Oscar-winning screenwriter Charlie Kaufman, Robert Carlock, who would go on to co-create 30 Rock with Tina Fey, future creator of The Office Greg Daniels, Dino Stamatopoulos, John Glazer, Spike Feresten, all future showrunners and writers on major series. And when it came to casting the on-screen talent, everyone wanted in. Tracy Morgan, Jimmy Fallon, Anna Gasteyer, all auditioned, none of them made the cut. Instead, Smigel went for unknowns. He personally cast Stephen Colbert, whom he had known for years and tried unsuccessfully to get onto Late Night with Conan O'Brien. Colbert was so desperate for the opportunity that he sent in a homemade audition tape using his newborn daughter as a puppet. And then you had Steve Carell, another virtual unknown who was selected after auditioning. This would be his big break, as we'll soon find out. Rounding out the main cast was Bill Chott, a Second City veteran, Elon Gould, a New York stand-up comic, and Heather Morgan, who was just getting her feet wet on network TV. So you had heavy hitters in the writer's room and virtual unknowns on the stage. That's a bold move, Cotton. Let's see how it worked out for them. The Dana Carvey Show premiered on Tuesday, March 12, 1996, 9:30 p.m., right after Home Improvement. The audience was massive. 21.1 million people tuned in after watching Tim Allen grunt and misuse power tools to see what Dana Carvey had in store. And what they got was not what they were expecting. The very first sketch was Carvey as President Bill Clinton at the Resolute desk. Now that sounds like typical Carvey SNL type stuff. An impression of a sitting president, slam dunk. Well, it was anything but. In this, the cold open, the first thing viewers saw, Bill announced that he wanted to be both mother and father to the American people.
Can be both father and mother to our nation.
And then demonstrated it by breastfeeding puppies, kittens, and a baby doll from a set of multiple prosthetic nipples attached to his chest. It was bizarre and to many grotesque, especially when you understand the context. This was the home improvement audience watching Bill Clinton breastfeed, and the viewers didn't like the taste of that. ABC's switchboards lit up immediately. Roughly 6 million viewers changed the channel before the first commercial break, and they never came back. But that was only the start of the chaos. By the end of the night, Taco Bell had pulled its sponsorship. So did Pizza Hut. Taco Bell was actually the title sponsor of the premiere. The show was literally called The Taco Bell Dana Carvey Show on screen. This was actually something the show did every week. They changed the title based on whoever the sponsor was, like shows did in the 50s when variety shows integrated sponsors directly into the broadcast. The Mug Root Beer Dana Carvey Show, the Mountain Dew Dana Carvey Show, the Pepsi Stuff Dana Carvey Show. This wasn't just funny or clever, which it was big money. To have your brand featured like that on prime time was not cheap, but there was also a huge risk. If those sponsors were unhappy with the show's content and they bailed, that's a lot of money walking out the door, not including other ads they'd run during commercial breaks. And this is where panic started setting in for ABC. PepsiCo, which owned Taco Bell as well as all the upcoming sponsors, wasn't bailing yet, but expressed concern about the show's content. At that point, the sub-brands like Taco Bell were making their own decisions, but PepsiCo pulling out 100% would be a disaster. Now, normally at this point, as a show, you'd maybe tone it down a bit, make a few adjustments, because you don't want to lose all your sponsors and have your show canceled. Instead, Carvey and his crew doubled down. The sketches remained bizarre and viewership dropped. Episode 2 drew around 15 million viewers, down 6 million from the premiere. But then things seemed to stabilize. Episode 3 actually saw a bump up to 16.7 million viewers, and Episode 4, which featured David Letterman, had a bigger spike at 19.7 million viewers. Might I add, that was the episode that came right after the Home Improvement episode where Jonathan Taylor Thomas had a cancer scare, one of the most heartbreaking episodes of that show's run. And it also made for one of the funniest juxtapositions in a commercial maybe ever.
ABC Tuesday, a parent's worst fear, losing a child.
I don't want to die, Dad.
You never know whose family it will happen to. An episode so powerful, it hits home.
We'll beat this thing, no matter what it is, I'm not letting anything happen to you.
A special home improvement followed by the Diet Mug Root Beer Dana Carvey.
But despite the ratings bump, ABC was still in panic mode. PepsiCo was on the brink of bailing and taking all of its sub-brands with it. So ABC, in an effort to keep the show afloat, kept going to Carvey begging for more family-friendly and ultimately advertiser-friendly skits. Carvey and Smigel said no. Instead, they got sketches like Waiters Who Are Nauseated by Food, in which Steve Carell and Stephen Colbert violently gagged and retched while describing menu items to diners. It got to the point where ABC's standards and practices folks were in constant battles with the writers over how much on-camera retching was acceptable for prime time, which is kind of crazy because this kind of stuff was actually funny and very well acted. But remember, it's 1996, and for 1996 PepsiCo, it was too much to stomach. They officially abandoned the show. By episode 6, the title sponsor was Szechuan Dynasty, a locally beloved Manhattan Chinese restaurant. Funny, but kind of a step down from a national brand. And episode 7 had no title sponsor at all. Ratings had cratered to 12.7 million viewers, which by today's standards sounds awesome, but not when you're following one of the top shows in the country. And that was enough for ABC. On April 30th, 1996, they canceled The Dana Carvey Show. 7 of 10 planned episodes had aired, and 8th had been fully produced but deemed too radioactive to broadcast. It included a sketch in which an anchor pre-taped grotesquely detailed obituaries for living public figures, including one for Gerald Ford so dark that ABC just flat out refused to air it. Funny enough, that sketch eventually made it to television essentially unchanged just months later when Carvey hosted SNL in October of 1996. Anyway, this was a huge commercial flop for Dana Carvey and Robert Smigel, but more disastrous career-wise for Carvey, because he was the main guy. It was his name on it, and his momentum ground to a halt. And really, when he looked back, it was a massive miscalculation. Carvey and Smigel had been offered deals with HBO and CBS. They chose ABC because they were, in Smigel's own words, overly tempted by the primetime profile and the massive lead-in audience. In trying to reach the biggest audience possible, they ended up with the wrong audience. Still, Carvey seemed to have no regrets, saying that we did not compromise anything, literally, in a completely commercialized environment, and did exactly what we wanted, for better or for worse. But as I alluded to, this basically stalled his career. He did Master of Disguise in 2002, which was critically panned, named one of the worst movies of the decade, and from there he chose family and selective creative work over chasing stardom. Yet, despite the show's commercial failure and Carvey's career fading as a result, his show played a major role in shaping pop culture for the next 30 years. When Steve Carell and Stephen Colbert walked out of that canceled show, they were still relative unknowns. The show had barely left its mark. But one person had been paying attention. Madeline Smithberg, co-creator of The Daily Show, had seen the Waiters Who Were Nauseated by Food sketch. She loved Carell and Colbert's work. When The Daily Show was building out its correspondent roster, she brought them in specifically because of that sketch. Of course, this rocketed both of them into stardom. Carell would eventually leave The Daily Show to pursue film, with his breakout hit being The 40-Year-Old Virgin, then following that up with Little Miss Sunshine, and of course The Office, Despicable Me, and so many other projects. He's arguably the most successful comedic actor of this century. Colbert would get his own spin-off of The Daily Show called The Colbert Report, and eventually take over The Late Show from David Letterman, ultimately becoming one of the most influential voices in American political comedy for 2 decades. As for Smigel, he went back to SNL as a writer and producer and quickly turned the cartoon ideas he started on the Dana Carvey Show into the legendary TV Funhouse segments, including the ambiguously gay duo. In 1997, he created Triumph the Insult Comic Dog for Late Night with Conan O'Brien, then went on to co-write films with Adam Sandler, including You Don't Mess with the Zohan and Hotel Transylvania. Charlie Kaufman wrote Being John Malkovich adaptation and won an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay for Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Carlock went on to co-create 30 Rock. Louis C.K., before his 2017 sexual misconduct admission, was one of the biggest stand-up comedians of the 2010s with his FX hit Louis. That's a lot of hit shows and movies and overall influence on pop culture that, especially in the case of Colbert and Carell, wouldn't have happened if not for this show and Robert Smigel casting unknowns. And really that speaks to the quality of the show. Quality wasn't the problem. It was the wrong audience at the wrong time. According to writer Dino Stamatopoulos, we were basically making Adult Swim shows before Adult Swim existed. He was right, it was ahead of its time. But luckily, the right people saw the talent, and for a show that lasted just 7 episodes, it's hard to find a production that pound for pound left more of a legacy on comedy than The Dana Carvey Show. If you enjoyed this deep dive, give the video a like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.